This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We are learning more tonight about the men rescued by the U.S. Border Patrol after they crossed from Manitoba into Minnesota. 2 of these men remain in hospital. They suffered hypothermia in a frigid bog. 7 more are in the custody of U.S. Immigration. And U.S. Border Patrol is still looking for a potential 10th person in the group. CBC's Bartley Kivas has the latest.
This was the scene west of Warroad, Minnesota on Tuesday, when the U.S. Border Patrol rescued 9 men who crossed over from Manitoba on foot. They wandered into a frigid, flooded bog. One called the RCMP in southeastern Manitoba, and they called U.S. authorities, who responded in protective dry suits, a flat-bottom boat, and an all-terrain vehicle on tracks. The Border Patrol said all 9 men crossed the border illegally, 7 are from Mexico, and they don't know the nationalities of 2 others who remain in hospital. The U.S. Border Patrol says this was a human smuggling operation, one where it doesn't appear the smugglers consider the safety of their clients.
They were told where they were dropped off to just walk a certain direction. It'd only be about a 20-minute walk, and they would be in the United States, and they would be on a road, and they would be picked up from there. And that definitely wasn't the case. They were walking all night and had to be rescued.
This incident south of Sprague took place a year after a family of 4 from India died near Emerson, Manitoba. The Patel family froze to death in extreme temperatures after being told it was a short walk to the United States. Experts say smugglers usually downplay the dangers involved in illegal border crossings, whether it's searing desert heat at the southern U.S. border or frigid cold at the 49th parallel.
I would be hard-pressed to find any individuals or families that would say, I'm still going to continue this journey knowing that this very route that they're undertaking, there's death up ahead.
Human rights activists say the U.S. and Canada ought to increase the ways people can legally cross the border.
When we make access to our countries more and more difficult to achieve, what you're doing is creating more space for smugglers and traffickers to thrive.
Illegal crossings from Manitoba into the United States are on the rise. Over the past 6 months, the U.S. Border Patrol says they encountered 100 people at least crossing into North Dakota or Minnesota. That's more than the entire year before that. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Academics and activists from across Canada have converged in Winnipeg to press governments for action on low-rent housing. With more and more families struggling to make ends meet, the need for affordable housing is growing. As CBC's Josh Crabb reports, an expert from outside the city sees potential solutions here.
A city where some people make their homes in bus shelters and tent encampments is the site of 2 conferences on housing and homelessness. Winnipeg isn't the only place with challenges. Pam Sanderson's son lives on the streets of Vancouver with addiction and an intellectual disability.
He's got some pretty serious mental health challenges, and there isn't any supports for him because there is absolutely no housing in Vancouver, as I think everyone in the country is aware.
She's attending this Social Housing and Human Rights Conference. It's a gathering of experts on low-rent housing, which coincides with a national congress held by the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association. Shauna McKinnon is a principal investigator with the Manitoba Research Alliance. She says the goal of the conference is to come up with an action plan to lobby governments to create more housing outside the private market.
Mainly people are going to the private sector for housing, and there's been really a dire shortage of housing, renting for around $750, which even many people who are on social assistance don't even get anywhere near $750 a month for rent.
Leilani Farha is a former United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right to housing. She visited people living in an encampment and had a meeting with Mayor Scott Gillingham on homelessness and talked about the need for low-rent housing.
You don't want people living in encampments for a long period of time. It's very cold in the winter here. It is the toughest living, right? And people in encampments want a home, rest assured.
Farha says governments need to find ways to help people living in encampments like some of the ones located along the river here in Winnipeg, not by forcing people out, but by helping them transition into safer, affordable housing. She sees opportunities in Winnipeg to create affordable housing in empty lots and vacant buildings. Gillingham's spokesperson says they had a good conversation and there may be ways to assemble land or streamline city approvals for housing projects. Steve Pomeroy with the Canadian Housing Evidence Collaborative says governments need to act fast because the problem is getting worse.
House prices have gone up massively, rents have gone up massively. The consequence of that is low-income folks whose income is either fixed or hasn't gone up are facing greater difficulties.
Sanderson says having a son who lives unhoused is the most difficult part of her life.
Well, he needs supports, like full wraparound supports, 24/7 supports.
She hopes change comes soon for her son and others experiencing homelessness. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A person has died after a fire overnight in Winnipeg's North End. Fire crews were called to the 600 block of Flora near McGregor just after 12:30 this morning. A woman was also treated at the scene for non-life-threatening injuries. The Major Crimes Unit is investigating. And Winnipeg police are looking for help solving a homicide case. A 25-year-old man named Leo Charles Martin Shea was assaulted on the east side of Main and Stella on Saturday, April 8th. Police didn't know about the assault until Martin Shea's condition worsened 3 days later, and he went to the hospital. Yesterday, he died of his injuries. Police are asking anyone with information about what happened or surveillance footage of Main and Stella to contact them. There is a video making the rounds on social media showing the apprehension of a newborn from its mother. This afternoon, it was discussed on the floor of the Manitoba legislature, and then the baby's family was told they'd be getting the baby back. The CBC's Ian Fraze joins us now live from the newsroom. Ian, first of all, do we know why this child was apprehended?
Janet, we don't have that answer, but what we do know is that less than a week ago, Child and Family Services showed up to the Winnipeg hospital room of a new Indigenous mother to apprehend her newborn child. Family tried to get CFS to leave, but it did not work. We're about to show you a portion of that video. The woman you'll hear speaking is a family member.
How is it you're able to come and take my granddaughter away, but you can't discuss with me why?
Okay.
This is, you're trying to kidnap my baby. We've had enough with kidnapping happening in our generations. You cannot do this.
I can give you 2 minutes to put her in.
You give me 2 minutes and explain to me why this is.
Have security become involved.
Security.
The province says the number of newborns taken into care has dropped 70% since 2020. That's when Manitoba stopped issuing birth alerts, the controversial practice of notifying hospitals and child welfare agencies that a parent deemed high risk is having a baby. The NDP's Nahani Fontaine says this family did everything right to keep their child.
Went to the extreme of moving into a new home that had enough space based on the standards that are, prescribed by CFS. Mom has her own room in this new residence. Mom spent months getting all of the clothes and diapers and cribs, everything that a baby would need to come home. And Mom's older sister had agreed that Mom and baby would come and live with them.
Imagine what it would be like if all of a sudden the government and police came knocking at your door and said, I'm going to take your baby away. That's something people in First Nations communities have to take for granted.
Dougal Lamont there from the Liberal Party speaking. Ian, what's the government's explanation for what happened?
Families Minister Rochelle Squires says she cannot speak about specifics.
Do uphold the principles of privacy and respect for families that are dealing with the CFS system. What I can say is that I've instructed the General Authority to provide extreme oversight and family planning with this family, and my understanding is that that is occurring as we speak.
And not long after Squires made those comments, the family spoke with CBC to say that they've been told they will be getting their baby back. Janet.
Thank you for this, Ian. CBC's Ian Fraze reporting live tonight. The Seven Oaks School Division is thinking about letting some of its social workers go. The division says due to a lack of funding, it's had to cut programs it wishes it could have kept. Currently, the division employs 8 social workers who travel from school to school. Some schools only have a social worker in the building once a week. The division says students should have supports on a day-to-day basis. Superintendent Brian O'Leary says learning support teachers and counselors can help provide that.
First, there'll be more teachers. So it's a decision in favor of teachers, some of whom play counseling support roles. We're adding 18 teaching positions and reallocating some of the social work positions.
O'Leary says some of these social workers will be reassigned, but layoffs are not off the table. This is despite the fact that just last month, the Seven Oaks School Division announced it would be increasing school levies to avoid staff cuts. The Manitoba Childcare Association says when it comes to assessing childcare, to accessing it, I should say, the province's $10 a day rates are a great start, but the industry cannot meet demand. The association says the wait for a daycare space can be up to 5 years long. It blames a lack of early childhood educators for those wait times. The association says there are 1,000 fewer workers in the sector now than there were 5 years ago. The group's president says people are leaving the profession for higher paying jobs that require less education. Many daycares are operating without enough trained staff.
35% of facilities are working with a provisional license, meaning not enough trained staff are caring for our children. That is not okay. This would not be acceptable in a school system, and it is not acceptable in our early childhood system.
The association says a competitive salary paying early childhood educators up to $27 an hour would help. It wants childcare to be a top issue in the upcoming election. Just going to have a swig of my water here.
As the snow continues outside.
As the precipitation continues outside. Is it actually snow? Yes,
it is actually. You know, we've had sort of a light, steady snow here in Winnipeg through most of the day, but this is what it looked like in Brandon this morning. And if you can imagine, the video you're seeing is sort of within city limits. Outside the city, it was even worse. Visibility in the morning was at about 3 kilometers. Right now in Brandon, it's down to 1 kilometer. So conditions are, well, a little worse than what you're seeing right there. The warnings have ended, though. Let me show you that. Now, Brandon is just on the edge of what is now a snowfall warning. So the winter storm warnings up around the Parklands region have now ended, simply because we're not expecting much more snow. There is still ice on the highways, still very windy conditions and challenging driving conditions. But Brandon and Winnipeg are just on the edge of this snowfall warning that is talking about an additional 10 centimeters or so tonight. And then we look out to this yellow shaded area out in northwestern Ontario, and that is still a winter storm warning. So it combines wind and snow and horrible driving conditions, that sort of thing. So yes, we still are expecting more snow tonight, and those are the current weather alerts. This is what the radar looks like. We've got the light snow in Winnipeg right now, a little bit of rain to the north of us. If you're up in Lac du Bonnet, Pinawa today, probably more rain than snow. You can see the snow is falling out into northwestern Ontario and still falling around the Brandon area, where, again, visibility right now in that southwestern part of the province is down to 1 kilometer in open areas. So we can see the rain up to the northeast of us, the snow in the Winnipeg area. This is moisture coming out of North Dakota, Minnesota, connected to that same low pressure system that's been kind of hanging around down to the southwest. Winds today, I had forecast them to gust of 50. Right now we're at 48 kilometers per hour. Temperature at 3. It's actually just below 3 by a few tenths of a degree, but yeah, still hovering right around that 2-3 degree mark, and will be tomorrow as well. Pressure at 101.6 and falling. Futurecast shows when this will all finally start to move off to the east and give us a break. Between now and Friday morning, though, still more snow. That's 8 a.m. Still falling quite heavily out in northwestern Ontario. By the time we get into the early afternoon, say 1 o'clock, will have moved to the east of the Red River Valley, and we will still have windy conditions from the north, and we will still have some cloud cover. Then Saturday, we start to get back into a sun-cloud mix, and Saturday night, we really do clear out for Sunday, and the winds will start to really drop off as we head through Saturday and Sunday. So this is forecast additional snowfall up to 6 a.m., and it has Winnipeg at 8 centimeters, higher in Morden, and certainly higher out in northwestern Ontario. And then you add a few hours to that, you get to 10 a.m., and we've got 11 centimeters. centimeters. So forecast modeling still calling for some accumulating snow to land here in Winnipeg. So don't put the shovels away just yet. Winds, that's the other part of the story. Morning winds, 59, 57. You get up into about the noon time, and we're looking at 60 in Winnipeg, and winds stay strong through the rest of the day. All right, wanted to show you a forecast for the whiteout party on Saturday, and I'm going to show you that, Janet, in the next weather segment along with the 7-day forecast.
Thank you, John. Now, if you are planning to head to the Lee Bryce concert tonight at Canada Life Centre, it has been postponed. Bryce performed in Regina last night and hasn't been able to make it to Winnipeg yet due to the weather. The show will be rescheduled. Tickets will be good for the new date once it's been confirmed. Stay with us. Your national headlines are next.
Kiss you from your head to your toes. I like your soul, baby. You got that heart made of gold, baby.
Canada's environment watchdog released 5 reports today. They show a need for a significant shift in approach if Ottawa wants to meet its own climate and biodiversity targets. The audit also focused on a big campaign promise made in 2019, one that the latest report says Ottawa is on track to miss. David Thurton reports.
What we're going to do is plant 2 billion trees over the next decade.
A big ticket campaign promise from the Liberals more than 3 years ago before the pandemic, which Canada's environment watchdog says isn't off to a great start.
They are not on track, and we provide recommendations that would allow them to get back on track to meet 2 billion trees by 2031.
As it stands, the government missed all of its planting targets so far, particularly last year. 60 million trees were supposed to go into the ground, but it's estimated only 16 million will make it.
The first year they made it, just about, close enough. Second year, not even close.
These delays could get even worse if the government doesn't find enough partners to help them out.
There are not that many federal lands to plant a lot of trees. They need partnerships with provinces, territories, Indigenous communities, municipalities, private sector to deliver on this.
Missing planting targets is not the only way the government is missing the mark.
They are overestimating the amount of emissions that are going to be sequestered as a result of the program as well.
Trees are natural carbon sinks, but they need time to grow and won't start reducing carbon emissions in 2030, as initially promised.
The core benefits of the program aren't going to be realized until after 2050. That's when the trees will be old enough that they'll start to sequester a reasonable amount of carbon.
Government accepts it cannot count on all those trees to meet Canada's climate targets.
We're not banking on the tree planting program to reduce emissions. We know it will, but the accountability is so complex that we're keeping it separate.
Trees weren't the only focus of the Environment Commissioner. His reports also found that emission regulations for cars and some trucks didn't meet their targets. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Tens of thousands of federal public workers are on strike for a second day. Pickets are set up at more than 250 locations across the country. The Public Service Alliance of Canada is demanding wage increases for members to keep pace with inflation. And it wants new rules around remote work to be included in collective agreements. The strike is affecting a number of government services, from processing passports and tax returns to immigration applications. About 50,000 workers have been deemed essential and are still on the job. Contracts expired in 2021. The strike began yesterday after the union and the federal government failed to reach a deal. A funeral was held today for an RCMP officer in Alberta who died on duty last week. Constable Harvinder Singh Dhami was killed in a crash on his way to assist fellow officers. Hundreds of police officers marked in procession today as a memory of Dhami. He was a member of the Strathcona County Detachment east of Edmonton. Last Monday, he lost control of his vehicle and hit a concrete barrier. He had served with the RCMP for 4 years. Constable Harvinder Dhami was 32 years old. A giant new rocket launched by SpaceX exploded just minutes after blasting off during its first test flight today. It looked good at first. Starship managed to reach nearly 40 kilometers high, but then appeared to have engine trouble. It blew up 4 minutes after liftoff and crashed into the Gulf of Mexico. No one was on board the 120-meter tall rocket. Elon Musk's company had hoped to take on the world in this round-the-world test flight. Once it achieves success, SpaceX has big plans for this reusable rocket. Starship is expected to eventually take people as well as cargo to the moon and eventually Mars. An investigation has begun into last night's fatal stampede in Yemen's capital. At least 78 people died. Hundreds had gathered to receive charitable cash donations. When the doors opened, people rushed forward and started tripping on steps in front of them. It came at the end of Ramadan, the Muslim holy month. 8 years of civil war has left a majority of Yemen's population needing aid. Still ahead, meteorologist John Sauder joins us with his 7-day forecast and one for Saturday's whiteout party as well. Then we'll bring you your daily lift. Stay with us.
All right, you're going to want to wear something warm and white downtown on Saturday afternoon if you are going to the Whiteout Street Party. Now, game time is 3 o'clock. Gates open at 1 o'clock. It should be right around 0. And then for the rest of the afternoon, temperatures are just holding steady around 2. 3 o'clock at 2 degrees and 6 p.m. at 2 degrees, but the winds start to relax just a little bit. Now, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Sunday, much lighter winds. We gradually warm up next week, and we're back into double digits by mid next week, you know, and we're not seeing much of it here, but elsewhere, there are signs of spring.
Yes, there are. Here's today's Daily Lift. cherry blossoms in Toronto's High Park. They're in bloom a little earlier than usual this year because they've had unseasonably warm weather. The annual spectacle is created when the buds of the Japanese sakura trees burst into those beautiful white and pink flowers. Only stay for about a week. Wouldn't it be great if these trees bloomed like that for months at a time?
On CBC, following us right here, the Leafs and Lightning, and then later the Jets are on the CBC.
Yes, they are. We're going to leave you with some images of people enjoying the first Jets game, watching it here in Winnipeg. Go Jets, go! And we'll see you tomorrow at 6.
Good night.